And I'd also like to thank again Burgess Salmon for their sponsorship of the science lecture at the Oxford Farming Conference. It's with great pleasure now, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome you, to invite you to join me in welcoming to the stage at the Oxford Farming Conference our Honorary President, Her Royal Highness, the Princess Royal.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's always a pleasure to be here, and here we are in 2019 already. Too late to wish you a happy new year, I suspect. But it is a time when there are a lot of changes ahead and possibly even more opportunities. And as you've already been hearing today, the rather formal part of your day, within the next 6 months, UK agriculture will join the rest of the UK in responding to the consequences of major change and opportunities. So the Oxford Farming Conference, with its mission to inform, challenge, and inspire, seems particularly relevant at this juncture, and charges delegates to consider what opportunities face us as we move forward next April. And it is also why the OFC Council decided to theme 2019's conference event as World of Opportunity. That implies a real international perspective, and perhaps a historical perspective is equally important. And I'm very pleased that there are so many emerging young leaders here, there are also quite a few whose international perspective goes back beyond the time when Europe seemed to be our main perspective. And we had a very broad base of business and consumers. I have a slightly different historical perspective. I'm struck this year, Save the Children celebrates its centenary. I think our founder, Eglantine Jebb, would be frankly astonished at the incredible improvement in the quality, particularly clean water and nutrition, that is available across the globe. And Save the Children and her basic approach to the health of children was about health, hygiene, and nutrition. And it still is, from the Save the Children's perspective. A lot of that is in 63 countries around the world who have rather different ideas from place to place what that nutrition should be and what it needs to be because of what is available and what is sustainable in their particular localities and climates. The availability of clean water is crucial to any improvement in healthcare. But having access to basic healthcare, particularly for maternal and child healthcare, remains patchy depending how far or how rural or where in a city you might live. And that provides me with a rather different perspective of the world of opportunity. And for many of those rural families which the Save the Children worked with, how they responded to an input from outside to improve the skills that they already had. And I think Eglantine Jebb's great strength was recognizing the skills that they already had in terms of their ability to feed themselves, and understanding which of the plants, which of the fruits that were available to them, or what meat was available to them would make a difference. And on that subject, you will find this slightly of a distraction, but in Somalia, nomadic families, basically lived on camel's milk and meat. But because the women were always the last to feed themselves, they fed the men and the children first, they were the most anemic women that the Save the Children had ever come across, because they had virtually no other form of iron available to them. Understanding how to change diets, what happens when you change people's lifestyles, and what happens when people become more globally aware of what is available. And another issue would be possibly food aid in the shape of European wheat, which gives people a taste for a grain which doesn't grow naturally in their areas, but is one they get a real taste for and want to grow in their areas. Having eaten many years ago what was available and was deemed as bread in some parts of Ethiopia, which appeared to look much more like a piece of tripe and much the same color, I have some sympathy with that decision-making process. But it would be fair to say that there are other grains which grow more easily and are less water-intensive than wheat. But this global perspective has brought about its own changes and assumptions of what should be available. And we respond, as you have done in many cases, to a change in fashion and attitude towards what people want to eat. But you're also talking about land use. You're also talking about what happens on the land and how that has changed. And that's an equally important part of understanding the social history that went before. I was in Edmonton for the Royal Agricultural Society's the Commonwealth meeting, which again provides a very good international perspective. 2 years before, we were in Singapore, where city farming, vertical farming, is very much an issue which they are pursuing. And you won't be at all surprised to hear that they're doing it very effectively and very efficiently. But it does open people's eyes to an alternative way of production and where you can produce. Edmonton, a little different. So already minus 13, although one of the speakers was a bee farmer. You may be interested to hear that he doesn't collect his bees, doesn't bring the hives in the winter, he leaves them. And sometimes they're under 8 foot of snow. He says it's all right, you can find them because there's usually a little air hole at the top. Now, bearing in mind our conversations just now about carbon dioxide and monoxide and what is produced by it, I think actually the other part of that air hole, yeah. So it works both ways, and it has some value. I did ask the question in Edmonton, did anybody know how many bison there were in North America before man started to intervene in terms of farming? It was more a rhetorical question. It was just to sort of take a temperature of, just give them an idea to ask a question. And a hand shot up at the back, and he said 63 million. I would like to know now, the next question to that is, how many domestically raised cattle are there in North America, and do they equate to 63 million and the equivalent, whatever? I'll leave you with that question, because obviously nobody here has yet stuck a hand out to tell me what that answer is. We have hugely changed so much of what was there before, and we will probably continue to do so as we learn how to do it. But are we going to change it back more to the rewilding that we were hearing about today? Does that fit with the demand for more convenience in terms of nutrition, and perhaps a more global view of, i.e., greater degrees of similarity across the globe than there was before in terms of nutrition? And how do we fit that rewilding into those demands? But I'm very struck by the fact that there is scope, and we've heard that before here, of being much more precise with where we farm and what we farm to get the best out of the land that is available and leave more land that can be wilder than it was when we simply farmed everything. That we can be more precise and be more efficient in order to achieve that. And there are so many other areas where research and innovation, which we've so often heard about here, and so often have been those who've come to the Oxford Farming Conference and have been discovered, who have been innovative, who have not been innovative just in terms of land use and how to earn a living from the land, but in using technology in agriculture appropriately, i.e. not being had by the concept of the art of the possible is always necessary. It isn't always, and understanding what that technology can do. That this organization, with the directors who work so hard to do so, to bring together your speakers who've, I hope you've found, have made a real impact on what you've already heard, whether you're talking about Zimbabwe or technology or just down the road from you. This is all relevant to our abilities to be more efficient, more effective, and more sustainable. Although I suspect if I asked Sir Mark, or indeed any of his research institutes, if they had the same definition of sustainability, more difficult and unlikely. But it is something that we need to have a better grip on in terms of our global opportunities. We also need to find ways, and this is where I think, we start the year, so many farming interests start the year here, because it is one of the ways of communicating, and it communicates a business that's progressive and that it should be sustainable, and the production techniques will contribute to that, and to communicate to a discerning public in a world that will need more food and will continue to do so, and we will also be affected by the information that comes through on different types of food and what that might mean. So this is a really important time to develop our abilities to communicate, and not just with each other, but with the consumers and for those who are not involved at all. We need to look at the future, and that includes succession planning for the next generation. And that is a debate, and that is an issue and a question which comes up nearly every year here. When you're looking to the future, when you're looking to that long-term investment view, is your ability to plan ahead through succession planning. The ambitions of agriculture and its requirement for scientific research and for development, and a greater uptake of those which are best technologies. But we also know from experience that nearly everybody regards their own situation as fundamentally different from somebody else's. And it's needing to understand what that technology can really achieve for you. I was intrigued to hear about not so much land use as water use in terms of floating dairy, but no mention of the robot milk stations, which seem to have been doing pretty well in terms of changing the way that people can have control and be more efficient in terms of feeding their cattle and providing a more regular form of dairy product. I hesitate to get sidetracked by diet because it's an easy one, isn't it? But I need to just mention the Birkbeck study. It was a student a few years back on waste pits in Syria, about 2000 BC. In a 2,000-year period, those waste tips went from all the bones as hunter-gatherers that they ate the meat of, but with those bones, there were 80 different varieties of seeds, which they picked in season to go with their meat. About 2,000 years later, they had settled to become more agrarian. The number of seeds dropped from 80 to 10. So there is some scope here to make those of us who find the present range of vegetables not not that exciting. Although I think there are some parts of the world where, let's face it, both our climate and what was capable of growing here rather mitigated against too much in the way of variety of vegetables. We shall have to learn to do so. And then the other side of that coin is the Mongolian diet, where there are no vegetables, because they don't grow them. That is purely meat and dairy products. But then they live in a very difficult and demanding climate and topography. And you have to say that for them, it works. We have to learn somewhere between these two what is the right approach. And this is what you have to offer, is that range of understanding and knowledge and what makes real sense. We know that all farmers have challenges to face, uncertain markets, unpredictable weather, and as well as all the other challenges that are changing all the time at the moment. And I hope that this conference helps you to sort out some of those challenges and some of those opportunities. And the OFC has also welcomed close to 50 scholars this year. And these are those young people starting out on their farming careers. And I'm delighted that so many of them want to come and be part of this conference to get the range of not only subjects, but experience that comes here. And it's also, OFC has made it possible for farmers and agribusiness people aged, these are the younger age group, between 30 and 45, bear that in mind, to apply to come to 2019 OFC as that emerging leader. I know this is only part of what you've been enjoying today in terms of debate and lecture. And you've got more to come in the second half of the conference. And I hope tomorrow's lunch also gives you an insight into how we are indeed living in a world of opportunity. But above all, I hope you will all have the opportunity to enjoy being part of the conference. What happens outside these halls is sometimes much more informative and helpful than what happens inside. I was going to say enjoyable, but I don't want to tear that too far. And of course, my other hat is the British Nutrition Foundation, where our scientific officer always used to end up her lectures on, didn't matter what specific type of food it was. Remember, all things in moderation. That kind of makes you healthier.